All right, so let's take a look at the parsing here for chapter 14. Questions, comments, concerns? What can we do for you? Let me just walk through a couple of these with you, and then if this primes the pump and stirs you up to ask any other questions, then we'll let you do that. All right, so number one, I have the alpha here. I see an alpha. What might I be thinking in terms of gender and number? Yeah, neuter plural, right? Neuter plural. What case is an alpha on a neuter plural sort of ending? Nominative or accusative. Plural neuter, right? Okay, great. Now, taking a look at what we have here, is this the article? No, because the article would always have what if it's neuter? It's always going to have a tau, right? The neuter article always has. Are there any neuter articles that don't have a tau? No, all neuter articles have the tau. Okay, this tau is missing. So that makes this the what? It's the relative pronoun. Very good. So relative pro. I am relatively a pro at some things, I guess. What would be the lexical form for your relative pronouns? Do I want you to just give me one form? No, you should always give me three forms to keep practicing the forms of the relative pronoun. So what are they? Has, he, and ha rather than ta, right? All right, good. And then how would you translate a relative pronoun of the neuter plural variety? Okay, which or that. Now, are you tempted to say who? Are there neuter people out there? There are, actually. Yes, there are. When you think about it, the word teknon is the word child. And if tekna, children, were the antecedent or the head of a relative clause where that was the relative pronoun for it, then it would be who, right? The children, ha, did something, would be the children who. So for the most part, you'd probably want to go with your more gender neutral forms like which or that, which could apply to masculine or feminine things. But you could also have who. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. One thing that I don't think we talked about, so let me mention it here. In English, what governs when we can use who versus which versus that for our relative pronoun? You ever thought about this? Yeah, a lot of times we just use the grammar and we don't really think about it. There's actually some rules. So yeah, who and whom I'm going to put together here as part of the who pronoun. No? That would be the difference between who and whom, right? But I'm assuming who and whom are the who forms. Do they all sound right? Sort of? Okay, good. So who is used when I'm dealing with persons? Okay, so I wouldn't say the rock who fell from the sky, right? So that's going to refer to things. I mean, who's going to refer to people, right? Okay, what about which? Yeah, so which will refer to things. Okay, so the rock which fell. Sounds good, doesn't it? But not the rock who fell. Okay, good. And that is both. Okay, so I could say the rock that fell and the man that came. Those are both appropriate. Okay? So, person, who, which, things, that, both. You're not. You're not. The child that went, but not the child which went. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, of course, our grammar rules get fuzzy, and through the consistent breaking of grammar rules, we sort of adopt new rules. And That just does happen. There's one other thing that's interesting about relative clauses, and it's the notion of what we call restrictive versus non-restrictive. Do you guys know that distinction? Restrictive versus non-restrictive. You ever heard of that? You're like, no, I got grounded, and that was sort of restrictive, but that's not what we're talking about here, is it? Yeah. So a restrictive relative clause is a relative clause that is necessary. You need the information of the relative clause in order to identify the referent of the head of the relative clause. Okay? And a non-restrictive relative clause is one where the information is simply additional but not necessary to identify the referent of the head of the relative clause. Let me give you a couple of examples here, okay? And hopefully this will make some sense. I've got two sentences here. The teachers who are on strike hate children. And the teachers who are on strike work for a private school. Can you tell that there's a difference between the relative clause, which is identical in both cases? The teachers who are on strike, the teachers who are on strike. What have I done in English? I've put commas here, okay? What does this tell you? Okay. Yeah, this is additional information. In other words, the teachers work for a private school. Do you suppose that it's only a subset of the teachers or all of them? Your assumption here, I think, should be that it's all of them. I'm talking about the teachers of a school. They all happen to be on strike, and the point I'm making is that they work for a private school, right? Over here, there's a larger group of teachers, and this relative clause is restricting who the teachers refer to a subset. Not all teachers, but the ones that are on strike. Those teachers hate children. Presumably the other ones love children and are committed to their jobs. Okay, so this is a restrictive relative clause, and this one is non-restrictive. Okay, I don't need the information of this relative clause to identify who the teachers are I'm talking about. Over here I do. Okay, now here's the thing about restrictive relative clauses. All right, and this is a matter of English. It's not a matter of Greek. With restrictive relative clauses, I can use who, and I can use that for people, right? But if I have a non-restrictive clause, I cannot use that for my relative clause. Try saying it with the pausing here. The teachers that are on strike work for a private school. Doesn't work, right? It's the teachers that are on strike hate children. Restrictive relative clauses can have the that. Okay? Make sense? No?
Teachers that are on strike work for a private school would be incorrect.
If it's non-restrictive, yes. To use that would make it restrictive, and it means a subset of the teachers. Only the teachers who are on strike, work at the private school.
So that changes it.
Yes, that makes it restrictive.
So it still sounds okay, but the meaning changes.
Well, if you'd put enough pausing here, it shouldn't sound okay. It should sound a little awkward to you. Yeah.
We would probably say the teachers on strike.
Yeah. Okay, so there are preachers who know Greek, right? And there are preachers who don't know Greek. So if I said something like, the Reformed preachers, comma, that know Greek, comma, preach well. Does that sound normal to you? the Reformed preachers that know Greek preach well. You would expect there not to be pausing here, right? The Reformed preachers that know Greek preach well. So, yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is there are lots of Reformed preachers, but it's the ones who know Greek preach well, okay? And again, using the that there commits you to a restrictive use. Using who is ambiguous. And at that point, it's what we call prosody. If you're just hearing English, prosody is the cadence and the pausing and whatever. The fact that I then use pausing then helps me disambiguate between whether it's restrictive or not. Okay? So, that's really a matter of English usage there. But there are interesting cases in Greek where interpreting relative clauses as restrictive or non-restrictive do make a difference. Does that relative clause narrow the referent of the head or doesn't it? And I wish I could remember exactly the examples. Maybe I can pull some out maybe on the break. So I attended a paper at Society of Biblical Literature a few years ago where somebody was looking at some cases where restrictive versus non-restrictive made a difference in your exegesis of certain passages, and it was very interesting. All right, so anyhow, there you go. Let's look at number 3. What case gender number is that? Nominative, singular, and feminine. And this is the relative pronoun, right? No? Well, the relative pronoun has a rough breathing. Ah, yes, that's right. So there's hey, see? Rough breathing and accent mark. This is rough breathing, no accent mark. So what's my lexical form? Ha, hey, ta. Okay, outstanding. Good. So how would I translate this? The. All right. That's great. Number 2. How do you pronounce that? Ho. And is it a pronoun or an article? Which pronoun? Is it the demonstrative or the relative pronoun? That's right. It's a relative pronoun, isn't it? All right, good. It has both rough breathing and accent mark, right? What would the article in this form be? By the way, what case gender number is this? Dative, singular, masculine, and neuter. Okay, great. So what would the article be if it were dative, singular, masculine, or neuter? Yeah, it would be the same form except it'd have a tau here. And instead of the rough breathing, I would just have the circumflex, right? Okay, great. Excellent. All right. And how would you translate this? So, yeah, it could be to whom or which. Ah, can you say to that? This is the man to that I sent this. No. So even in English, again, there are some restrictions on our grammar that we just know how to use it, right? So you can't use that for every situation. Okay, great. Let's see. How about the difference between haste and hain? Are they the same word or are they different words? 7 and 10. What's that? They are the same word. Is it the article or a pronoun? is a pronoun. Which pronoun is this? This is the relative pronoun. Good. And finally, what case gender number is Hayes? Genitive, singular, feminine. You're sure that's genitive, singular? Not accusative, plural? Look at number 5. What's that? Okay, and what case? Accusative, plural. Is it feminine? Okay, good. Hain is accusative, singular, feminine. So these are 3 feminine forms, huh? You can see the difference, though, can't you? Eta forms are singular. Alpha forms are plural. All feminine. All right, good deal. All right, how would I translate Haas, number 5? Okay, yep, whom, if it's the object, right? These are the women whom Jesus sent. Or, would I use which? I could if the which, or if the Haas is referring to things, right? These are the hours that went slowly, okay? But not the hours whom or who. Okay, and then, so that, right? So whom, which, or that. Then what about haste as a genitive singular feminine? Of whom. Good, or of which. What about of that? Nope. Can't use that in there. There. People who are losing the pronoun case system in English would say of who. It's supposed to be of whom, but nowadays, if you put that M in there, you sound intelligent and well educated, don't you? Yes. And sometimes people use it when they're not supposed to, and they think they sound intelligent. And to some people they do, and to people who know the rules, they don't. So be careful here. All right, and then Hain would be accusative singular. So should have an M there, right? Whom? Because it would be the object. Yes. Yes, that's right. So basically the difference between who and whom is the difference between he and him, right? That M there. She and her. And we had a friend who, when he and his wife were expecting, they didn't want to learn the gender, so they referred to the child as Herm. Yeah, which sort of is interesting. Okay, let's go on to the warm-ups, shall we? Now that we've ruined your pure thoughts here.
Number 9.
Yeah.
Just a question on the gender.
Mm-hmm.
And it's dative singular from OT. But, I mean, I got that wrong, so
Mm-hmm.
I guess the answer is neuter.
Yes, that's right. So when you learned this vocab word, it was phos. And what I would strongly encourage you to do is to memorize that article with it. It's taphos. Taphos. It's the light, neuter form. You cannot tell by looking at the case ending, right? Because third declension case endings, all of them have an iota. Every one of them. So gender's not going to be distinguished here. So you just got to learn it when you learn the vocab word.
It would be, that's how you determine.
It's the only-
Just think of light as not a gender.
Well, that's not going to help you because there are other inanimate things that are masculine or feminine, but we would refer to them as things in English.
So just memorizing vocab words.
Yep.
3 of them do that. That's how you're supposed to.
Yeah, when you learn your vocab words, learn your article with it. Article ta goes with phos. Now, If you had been dropped into the middle of the Greek world and there had never been a Greek grammar written, and you were a linguist having to figure out, okay, no one's ever described the Greek language before, and I'm going to write the first grammar to do it, then you wouldn't really have Mounce to go on, right? You wouldn't have a lexicon to use. Nobody would tell you which article goes with that noun. So what would you do at that point? This is where what linguists do when they are going and reducing a language to writing and write grammars of a language that has never been written before. This is the sort of thing that they have to wrestle with. So what would you do at that point? Well, you would get a native speaker, and you would just start drilling the native speaker about which forms that noun has. So you would maybe give them sentences to say, okay, here's the sentence, blank shines brightly. Now, which form of this word would you put there? And then you'd realize, okay, that would be the nominative form, right? Whatever would be the subject. Someone hates the, now what would you put here? And then you would find that phos could be the subject and phos could be the object. Well, that would be a clue if you've learned that other neuter nouns have the same nominative and accusative form, that this is going to pattern with those. And then you might ask, well, which kind of adjectives could describe it, right? And then you might see, okay, this is using the same adjective forms, endings that I see on other neuter nouns. So then you come up with these categories, right? And you'd find that there are basically three different sets of genders that nouns could pattern in. So it's kind of interesting what languages do with this sort of thing. But you'd figure it out if you knew what kinds of questions to ask and what sort of tests, to run.